Hey guys, this is the very first episode of the JRB Podcast featuring Jeff Jones, Ryan Levine, and Bohdan Temnyk. Say hello, guys.
Hello.
So
And this is hopefully, like I said, the first of a brand new podcast series. And we're just going to talk about Yu-Gi-Oh! And stuff that's going on. And
Yeah,
for
maybe
the
some
first
stuff that
episode,
already happened as well. That's something
yeah,
we're
maybe some
sort of
stuff
looking at.
that's already happened,
We're
yes.
we're very old, so we have a lot of fun stories that we can hopefully be allowed to tell you. Yeah, we'll play that by ear.
Yeah,
We'll see.
there are a lot of old stories that are very not friendly
Or
to.
just interesting, like stuff that people are really misinformed about. If people talk about Edison format, guess who won the only Edison event? We have Jeff Jones. That's stuff like that. We'll sort of come to now and then.
first, I think
Yeah,
we want to
so
talk about the ban list, the current
Yeah,
ban, the newest ban. It went into effect yesterday as of a
it really
recording,
did.
right?
It really did. 2 days ago for me. But it's neither here nor there.
You're in the future, yeah, it's
We
fine.
also had a public
he's in the
holiday on the
future.
Monday, so there were tournaments
Hmm.
on the Monday when it did become legal. It's very funny to me.
Yeah, so we'll definitely kind of go over the forbidden list, our thoughts, things that we wish happened or thought should happen. Um, and after that, we're going to lead into something called Heart of the Underdog and talk about that because I think it's a really interesting format that can help grow your Yu-Gi-Oh scene in your local area. Um, so yeah, let's go ahead and jump right into this forbidden list. I already have it up on my screen. I don't know if you guys have it up on
Oh,
your
I
screen.
will. I will make sure I have it on my screen. I think I remember it, but I'll make sure I
I
have it up on
really,
my
I
screen.
really had to
Yeah.
also look it up just to be sure, because I feel like there was some changes that probably aren't super impactful, but it's good to know. There's a lot of cards that you tend to look at when a ban list drops, and you're like, wait, this card went to 3, this card went to 1, because you always assume they're already at 3 or they're already at 1. You know,
There are
Yeah.
definitely been
uh,
cards that, yeah, we're like, wait, this card is going to 3?
yeah, like shooting
Uh,
Rise of Dragon for 1 went to unlimited this list, but it's
Yeah.
neither here nor
I
there.
guess before we go into specifics, can we do overall thoughts? I'm going to be very contrarian, and I know it missed Mystic Mind, which we'll get into, I'm
Hmm.
sure, but I don't hate this ban list. I think at the minimum, every card that moved on this list, I think moved in the correct direction,
Oh,
which is
definitely.
not something that I always feel. I feel like sometimes they limit cards, maybe they didn't need to. I think when Nadir Servant got semi-limited, I think that actually took away from the more fair decks in the game, and stuff like that. And then I feel like maybe sometimes when a card gets unlimited, like when they put Skill Drain to 3, like at the time I felt very strong that that wasn't the right move. But this one, I feel like every single card that moved, I think moved in the right way. So at least it has that going for it, in my opinion.
yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's a very kind of good way to think about it when you're thinking about is a forbidden list good or not. If you look at these things and think, oh, if this card going up or down was that good or bad, and you can kind of gauge what you what you end up with, you can kind of gauge whether that forbidden list you think was a good forbidden list, even if you don't like it from an outside perspective. It would still be good, and I agree. Every single one of these changes that moved up or down was a correct step in the right direction.
Yeah,
And
no,
a lot of
I feel
cards
the
moved.
exact same
Like
way.
a lot of cards.
Yeah. I feel like people take for granted how impactful a lot of these changes were, especially when you look at how the last format sort of panned out, the introduction of a lot of the cards and power of the elements as well. Just like looking at each card individually and seeing how much the decks will change. Granted, we only really have, what, like 2 events under this ban list before we have Darkwing Blast. And then after that, we'll have the Magnificent, Malevolent, whatever,
Magnificent
Mavens.
Mavens.
Yes,
Yeah,
some
Mavens.
some
Magnificent
adjective and
Mavens, yeah.
Mavens. Yes. Yeah. So like, really, only gonna get to see one event. Before we basically have like a soft reset anyway, right? Because like the other cards are so impactful. We can get into those later. But yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see how Utrecht and the 3v3 in Ecuador sort of translate after this list. Because I know a lot of our testing has just been like, ooh, like, you know, is there like a deck that's more powerful than what we had with Tearlament? Like, what are we gonna do? There's no more Elf Toad, like less limiting for some decks. So yeah, I think it'll be really, really good. I think these are some really good hits.
I guess
Yeah,
you want
so
to just like go down the line. Yeah,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
on,
Yeah, so
on
just
some of
go
them.
down the line. So obviously the very first forbidden card we have Fairy Tale Snow, which of course we know Jesse is very sad about. But I'd probably say the majority of people are not sad about this going away.
Yeah. I think it
Yeah.
was shocking when it came back in January, and not shocking it is already gone.
Yeah, this
Yes.
Right?
card is
Like,
only ever used for evil, right? Like, this is a card
yeah,
that, yeah,
yeah.
its intended purpose is like, oh, haha, funny, I'll search it off Luna. You know what I mean? Like, no, like, this card has been turboed into the graveyard and limiting a bunch of decks from the get-go, you know?
Yeah.
Something that I also just kind of like, I always love talking about because it's crazy to me how a card like this is at 3 in Japan.
Oh,
And
yeah.
And they just don't play it.
and they don't even play it. On top of that, they have like multiple of the grass is greener and stuff
Mm.
like that as well to facilitate this card. And it still just isn't good enough. But anytime this card is in our format, even at 1, it just completely shuts down certain decks. And I would say that in a format in Japan, that this card almost is even better there because in tandem with Max C, this card can just shut down an entire opponent's turn.
Oh, yeah, it's
And
very oppressive,
also,
right?
when you get Max Seed, you can feel a lot better about passing your turn with a Snow in the Grave, don't
Mm.
you think?
No, I agree. I think it's the same sort of thing where people are like, oh, I want Max C back. And it's like, well, when these decks really just like have their one normal summon and then every follow up play involves a special summon, and then you Max C them after already stopping the normal summon. You know, like Max C on like a lot of these normal summons tends to be really, really good anyway. Now we Snow block, you have to activate starter, I chain Max C, like the game is done. But I think the other argument is like Japan also has like, well, they had or they do have like the additional copy of Call by the Grave that might be an argument. And I think also the Ishizu cards kind of do come into play when it comes to Snow's efficiency, but you still didn't really see Snow before a lot of those cards came out, which is still really
Yeah,
interesting.
I was gonna say that even before then, because I was saying on top of those cards, you
Mm.
also have the Bestial cards, which
Yeah,
are
that's
about
true.
to
That's
pretty
true.
say
Yeah.
like
pretty
I
good against Snow.
wonder it like I don't know how to put this. I wonder if banning Snow right now was necessary with the Bistids coming out. Surely you'd still play Snow. Like because there's something I actually want to talk about.
Mm.
You know, like when cards like the Bistids come out, right? And they're so like heavy, like anti-meta against certain strategies, like grave-based light and dark strategies.
Mm.
You really have two ways to combat them, and that is to play no lights and darks, right? And just you know like not let them get any value at all, or play
You
so
overcompensate.
many extra things that trigger in the graveyard that they can't banish all of them. So surely we would just still play Snow because it would just be an extra layer that you'd force the bestial cards to interact with. So yeah, I actually you know so as much as you might argue, well, the Ishizu and the bestials might keep Snow in check, I
Mm.
think it might like kind of actually end up being the opposite, where now there's just an extra layer that these Bestial and Ishizu cards have to check as opposed to the actual engine.
Well, like, what are you gonna
Yeah,
do?
no,
Like, not run light or dark monsters? You know what I mean? It's like,
So that's what
yeah,
that's what
yeah,
I'm saying. That's what I'm
yeah.
saying. Is like you have to, yeah.
Like how many times are you just gonna get bestialed anyway? Yeah, it's whatever. I would accept it. I feel like unless the format sort of like devolved into some mess like post Mama, where it just becomes like one big like you don't know how your turn even plays out or like how anyone even resolves their turn. Because one
Yeah.
person will activate one of the pieces, and then the other person will proc a piece, and then like stuff will get put back, and no one will know what's going on. So
That event will take forever if people haven't tested how those interactions work. There will be so many judge calls when the Ishizu pieces mill the opponent's Ishizu pieces and like the chains start. Oh my god, it'll just be so. I do not envy anybody judging
Do you
Pasadena.
guys remember like the first event we saw that was streamed with those cards, that was really funny, I think. Where it was
Yeah.
like, I think it was like a random like Duelist Cup or something. It might have been like in like Southeast Asia,
For the
one of
Japanese
those ones.
tournaments.
Yeah, it was one of those weird ones where it's like their turn took 15 minutes to resolve, but it was like literally just like the opponent's turn. You know what I mean? It's
Yes.
like, oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, cool.
Because
like,
like wasn't it like Havnus milled in a Shizu piece that
Mm.
milled like 5 more, and then it just triggered like 11 effects, and just like the opponent milled some, and like it triggered their effect. Yeah, like I.
And they're like, all right, I'll chain mine and banish to shuffle your back, and then they're like, okay, I'll chain
Yeah.
mine and shuffle your guy's back, and it
Mm.
was literally like chain link 14 or something. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah, they also, I
Yeah.
don't think they knew how to actually resolve it. In you know what I mean? Like, I think a lot of people will get confused when there's a lot of triggers there.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
I think that's also
it'll
like,
be an interesting event.
yeah,
It'll be very
that's-
complicated.
Well, that's
I
also
think.
like tier already sort of has that kind of issue, right? Where people
Yeah.
will hit a bunch of triggers and then they'll get kind of flustered or can be like, I know sometimes it'll happen with me where it's like you hit like the nut mill with like your mill 8 after like maybe you've resolved like an instant fusion or something dumb where it's just like all your effects are still online and you just look at it and you're like, ah, shit, like what do I do? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, oh no.
Yeah.
But yeah.
You're just like, it probably doesn't matter what I do, but like I still have to do this optimally.
Yeah,
Like I probably win, but who knows? But yeah, I think we should move on to Ronintoadin. I have a lot to say about this one. I don't know if you guys have a.
I think that was the correct hit. Like for
I agree.
sure.
Yep.
Yeah. I think that was a really like left field one. You know what I mean? I feel like they don't tend to hit cards like that all that often. So I'm very pleased to see them hit Ronin specifically. Some of the purists might be really upset about that, but I think that card, again, another card that was only used for evil. Initial evil thoughts were Substitute and Ronin. Like, obviously, like, Substitute facilitated a lot of it. You can still FTK without Ronintoadin. That's evident in Edison format currently. But, yeah, no, I don't think Ronin needed to exist at all. So
like, the way I feel about cards like Ronintoadin, I feel very similarly to Ronintoadin as I do to Phoenix Blade, if that makes sense. Cards that I like, older cards that are not once per turn, that when they were created, they didn't know what they were doing, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Like, they didn't understand the extent of what these cards would do. And Phoenix Blade is forbidden in Japan. It's not forbidden here somehow. I don't know how that card is still legal, but that is a card that, unrelated to all this, I do wish would get banned eventually, because every time a soul comes back, it's just that card is just insane. And the argument is, well, if a soul makes it insane, I'm like, well, no, that card's been insane in many times in history. You know, like it's just like a card that its actual functional purpose, similar to Ronintoadin, of like, I imagine when they made Ronintoadin, well, one, Exceeds weren't out yet, and neither were Links, right? So it says it can't be used as synchro material. So when that card was printed, it was designed to be tribute fodder, right? And you're supposed to play Frog Monarch, and that deck is fine, right? Like, obviously, nobody is going to say that Frog Monarch is an oppressive, like, broken strategy in Yu-Gi-Oh! But, like, unless we received an errata of Ronintoadin to either be once per turn, or to say can't be exceeded with, or to say can't be linked with,
I think
it's
Linked
just a
might
card
be
that, like,
one of the bigger ones, though. Maybe.
Yeah.
But I'm not
like,
sure.
it just can't exist in the modern game, I feel. Because we even saw in Japan, the approach they took, instead of banning Rodin, was they banned Toad, and we just saw Sprite still just play Ronintoadin because it was just like 3 free level 2s, you know?
Yeah,
Like-
and you know what happened? They also limited Swap Frog. So
Yeah.
that tells us that by banning Toad was not the sole problem or the issue.
Exactly.
And I go by the philosophy, I would rather ban one card than hit multiple.
Yeah.
And I think Ronintoadin does that. You hit the one card, and the rest of it kind of just falls in line, and it's fine for now.
Speaking of one card instead of multiple, Fiber getting forbidden, the next one, unbanned 4 cards or something, right? Like, we actually got like 4 cards back, which is, I think,
it was very unexpected, honestly.
Yeah. I think. Well, actually, okay. I would argue that it would have been unexpected for a long time. However, Japan banned it, and then Master Duel announced they were banning it right before our list came out.
That's pretty reasonable.
So, Yeah, so I do think at this point everybody was like, all right, it's probably going, right?
Mm.
But the one tuner we didn't get back was Glow Up Bulb.
Yes.
And I think
Yeah.
that's correct. I don't think we needed Glow Up Bulb back. I think that's, like, of the cards that were legal with links and then got forbidden right before Fiber, I think Glow Up Bulb is maybe too good, especially with the synergies with the new, like, Rika, Sun Avalon stuff you could probably do with Glow Up Bulb. I think it's probably for the best that we didn't get that one back.
Bulb might actually just facilitate a bunch of stuff in the Naturia deck, so it's kind of interesting to see them not maybe bring that back, because I don't think a lot of the plant stuff that's happening currently is super oppressive. I also don't know if Bulb actually, like, opens up too much. It's just, like, gonna be a generic one card that ends up in every plant deck, but it's, like, the one card that generates two bodies, so... I can see
So
why they
yeah,
wouldn't want to bring it back,
I
but
I'm more inclined to be on Boden's side of the argument with this, where if you look at the meta, which I have many times before Firebrax came out, Glow Bulb saw very little play. And while we have had 2 years since then, I don't think that much has changed to make it so Glow Bulb is some super scary card that makes some crazy combo. I think it'll just find itself into any sort of plant deck, and I think it would be in any sort of kind of generic good stuff deck.
but
And
Jeff, Bulb Mill, that's your element. Oh no.
yeah, yeah.
I'm
And
I'm pretty sure
and
Bulb
on
is
the
just a
I would
cost anyway.
really not like.
Yeah.
I would not like my opponent to mill a Bulb in the
Yeah.
Element deck. I would not like that. That would not be fun. I
and
would
as we're
not
talking
appreciate
about,
that.
Ryan mentioned that it just being two bodies in one. Multiple of these are two bodies in one that we brought back.
Oh, it isn't a cost. Never
Not
mind.
just Glow Bulb. We still have Steam the Cloak. That's actually more than two bodies with this effect. It ends up being three. And same thing with Olion. Olion is effectively two bodies in one.
I feel like they were
I
maybe
like
testing the waters
Orion
with Steam.
in the
right?
context of Scrap Recycler. I think that brings back the option to. What did they used to do? It was just Scrap Recycler send O-Lion, and then the O-Lion token of Scrap Recycler makes Scrap Wyvern.
Yeah.
Am I remembering that correctly?
It's like I think
so-
one card generates like it's like Apo and then Orcus combo or something, right? That was like the whole
not
thing.
Orcus combo anymore, I
Well,
guess.
yeah, you know what I mean?
really.
Like that was like the main
Not
sort of
really.
idea, yeah.
Yeah, I got you.
It was like make lib do something, whatever. Like you dump like a world legacy card now, and I think that's still like kind of technically fake full combo, but yeah.
Yeah. But
I just always compare it to when you look at what we're doing now in Yu-Gi-Oh! I think it's fine.
Yeah.
Sure. That's fair. That's fair. I also think that Fiber being banned, man, long time coming. I actually just like it's. I feel like okay. I feel like in 2018 we had like an era where there were a ton of broken links, that just like all the decks fall into, like Nightmare Mermaid, Nightmare Goblin, Gumblar, Firewall, right? And then Summon Sork, and then just like until all of those were gone, there was like a broken combo deck that was just like any two monsters in the whole game could just kill you. And then we kind of, starting with the printing of Link Cross and Fiber and Auroradon, we kind of entered like a second one of those, and and Anaconda with Dual Overlord. And now finally all of these super generic Union Carrier, Anaconda, Fiber, Auroradon are finally all gone. I feel like finally you have to play cards in the archetype of your deck. You're not just putting two monsters on the field and summoning any monster in the whole game.
Well, this is just what happened with Xyz, right? Like you had all
the
silly broken Xyz, and then they all periodically got hit. And then it's like, okay, now we're back to normal. It's the same sort of issue that they had with like the main deck, right? Like a lot of their argument for hitting certain cards was like, oh, it just like doesn't give you creative deck building because like your deck will automatically start. Like obviously it's kind of redundant now because that's just like what happens when you have like a tier 0 deck. Like your deck automatically starts with like these 15 cards, but your extra deck would just be like, I have to play these 6 cards, and then the other 9 are either like archetypal or like, related to whatever level or type your deck is. So yeah. I think they're just like figuring out, hey, like maybe the super duper generic cards can't be that good. I think like Elf is like a silly card and will probably end up getting banned, but I think it's a good level of like, this card is kind of cool. Like
it's a
this
bit more
card is never that.
than the ones.
It's not as ridiculous. Like the fact you can't link with it, I think is pretty good. Like it's like Anaconda levels of good, but not like still overblown. Like this card is the only thing that's being summoned. Like, well, it is, but I don't think it's like every deck isn't just like 2 monsters Predaplan. It's like, no, you have to have a level 2 in your deck. Then you can make Elf. You know, like you have links and stuff, like, obviously, but still, like usually the level 2 sort of just if it facilitates like a little bit more in that strategy. So
on the topic of Elf, and that's one card that I think again I have a problem with. Where you're like, oh, it's like a good card. I think we've talked about this before and all agreed like this card's going to be like the next generic big thing.
Yes, for sure.
And my problem with Elf and the new one we were talking about earlier, Ryan,
that's a big one.
It limits card design in level 2 monsters, similar to how like other things like 1-for-1 like limits card design for level 1 monsters.
Well,
or anything
limited
like
card design for tuna monsters, right? Like
exactly, and we're going to run into the same situation where eventually something might happen to these generic kind of link to level 2 monsters, because as long as they exist, you really can't print any super good level 2 monsters. So if they do print super good level 2 monsters, we'll probably just see these go. Or they could just do what they did to Help,
they ban the
all the good
level
level 2 monsters.
Yeah, which they did already, because they banned Ronintoadin.
It's crazy.
Like he's the first victim.
I was reading Road of the King article because I was like, oh yeah, we'll have a look, see like what week 0 is looking like. And at the bottom, it's just like, Sprite is not doing too well. However, every deck's extra deck has 1 Gigantic, 1 Sprint, and 1 Elf. And that was it. And I was like, yeah, good enough. Like, that makes sense. It's just how Yu-Gi-Oh! Has been since the beginning. So, here we are. Let's get into Chaos Ruler, I guess. That's another one I didn't really expect. That card is...
It's a card that this is like when Pot of Desires got limited to 1. I expected it to happen, but not at that time. I've always expected Chaos Ruler to get banned, but never this soon. I thought it was going to live for quite a long time.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like, I think Ruler without Fibrax is actually like pretty manageable, right? Like, I think the Punk engine
also without Snow.
Yeah, well, that too. But I think more so like you were just able to generate obviously like a free body and then a way to get to Fibrax, and then it's just a free way to get to Baron. And I think that's like, we saw it not be good when Dark Ruler was more in the format, and then we sort of saw it pick up steam again when people realized, oh, like we need like hand traps to interact with a lot of these like Tour Element boards, because they're doing a lot of like Eradicator or like the really ignorant sort of stuff. And when you look at it that way, it's like, maybe if you hit Fibrax, you're meant to keep Ruler, and then you sort of open up like some other decks. Like your Punk engine still generates a bunch of free bodies, which is like really cool. Maybe you can like do some Psychic and Punisher, BS, like just go from there. Now it's like, well, what does my Punk engine do now? I make like Jam Drive and add Ogre and then make, like something. I don't know. That's kind of interesting. Like I feel like hitting both of them sort of just made like the splashable like Punk engine significantly worse. Which is, I don't know if that's good or bad. Only time will tell. But I thought that was like probably the coolest package in the game of like 3 Telly, the 3 Punk cards. Like you got to make Chaos Ruler, like cool. Half the time Chaos Ruler wasn't even good in your deck. Like just like you add a hand trap, right? Like that was really about it. It sort of limited the Dragon Link deck too, I guess. I don't know. It felt like an unnecessary hit.
Where there's a light or dark sword soul monster, Moye was making Chaos Ruler, and we lived in the utopian society.
The dream.
But here we are. I think the Punk cards are strong enough, honestly. But
so there is something I want to talk about this because it's going to come up eventually. Is that not in Darkwing Blast, but the following set is a new archetype of chaos cards that revolve around synchro summoning.
Oh.
And it's and it's all about light and dark, and they even summon chaos monsters that are synchro monsters from your extra deck. So the fact that this got forbidden before that set comes out says a lot to me, because usually you would want something like this to help sell your cards. So that either leads me to believe
They're
that they
really
think this
good.
card is those cards are really good, or it's an oversight. So I would even consider thinking that Chaos Ruler might be coming back around after I don't know what the set name is. Do you guys know what the set is?
The PHY,
Photon Hypernova.
PHY, yeah.
Yeah, Photon Hypernova.
Yeah,
Photon Hypernova. Yeah. So we might even just see this card back to help facilitate the new Chaos deck as well.
We've seen they don't really
Maybe it'll have an
care,
errata,
right?
Honestly.
Like
it
they'll
might
bring
even,
cards
like,
back very quickly.
That's something Japan likes doing.
Yeah.
Actually, is like even if a card isn't like banned, I've seen a couple of times. I believe they've like errataed something, or like they'll bring it back and they'll errata, and it's like maybe on like the next. I mean, I don't know. I'm just spewing now.
You're saying like they bring ruler back,
like
but you can't summon it the turn you mill with it, or the turn you really summon
maybe.
it?
Maybe you can't summon it back the turn you mill or something. I don't know. This is just
I feel
me
you.
just.
I think also what they could do is we're going off on tangents now, which we knew was going to happen.
Of course, yeah.
When with a new deck type like that, we just saw in the previews today for the new ninja cards that there's a new trap card that revolves around flipping all monsters face down, and that does help the ninja deck, which involves around flipping your monsters face down and face up. So what could happen is that they print a brand new Chaos Ruler like card as a world premiere card in the next set.
Yeah, and maybe that's true. I was actually hoping we would get a Starlight Chaos Ruler in Photon Hypernova because they've shown with DPE, they're willing to make the Starlight not always be like classic old cards. It was like clearly there was an oversight. DPE should have been Starlight in Burst of Destiny, and they were like, okay, we messed up. We're going to make it Starlight in Power of the Elements with the new hero support. I was kind of hoping. I think Chaos Ruler should have been a Starlight in Rise of the Duelist.
I actually agree with that.
That set had a ton of cards that were Starlight contenders, to be honest. So that's whatever. But so I was kind of hoping that maybe it was going to be Starlight in Photon Hypernova to go with the new Chaos cards. Obviously, that doesn't look like it's going to happen anymore, as this card is now forbidden. So, unless we have a January list that just unbans Chaos Ruler immediately for some reason, I don't think we're going to see that. But
All right. Well, I think that's enough about Chaos Ruler. It's still a fallen friend. Let's look at Red Reboot. I think.
Goodbye. Good riddance.
Yeah. Pretty much.
I think there isn't much to say except for yes. The only thing I would like to say is with Red Reboot gone, I would have liked to see something like Heavy Storm return.
Yeah.
Interesting.
We have Duster, right? Like you may as well.
I think we have enough of those, though. I think we have Duster, we have Lightning Storm. Like we have enough of those types of cards.
The funny thing is, though, those cards end up sucking, though, right? Like that. Well, not sucking.
I agree. Those cards do end up sucking.
It's just weird how that sort of pans out. Like I feel like a lot of the time, maybe for the last like 6-7-ish months, you sort of just saw people gravitate away from like even just having Duster in their sideboard. Well, like a majority of people I found, and it ended up just being like the one copy of Reboot. People would mess around between cards like Storm evenly. Like I don't know. Like I feel like Storm could probably come back, be fine, right? It's just another copy of Feather Duster. It's a less awkward Lightning Storm, I guess, against like Mystic Mine. So. But then remember the logic of like not bringing back Heavy Storm, where they were just like it pops your own pendulum cards or something.
Yeah,
I remember that was like the discussion.
Nonsense.
It's like okay,
literal nonsense.
Wait, what if they bring back Heavy Storm and then it opens up the new Draco Slayer stuff? Yeah, think about it.
Trunade. Then just bring back Trunade. Then I don't know.
Actually, Trunade might be. Nah, Trunade's only used for evil for sure. That's a bad card.
Trunade would be used for evil, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be used for evil, but I think more often than not, it would not be used for evil.
It's a card that plays around Heavenly Prison, right? It plays around
I would
Starlight
not
Road
hate
bullshit.
to see a one-sided Trunade. I think that would be a fine card, honestly.
Yeah, sure, I would agree with that.
Return all spells and traps your opponent controls to the hand.
Yeah,
I don't think that would be that crazy.
That's
and I'm
kind of what we got
surprised that
with
card
Blizzard,
actually
right?
doesn't exist.
Yeah.
It's like a little bit of what Blizzard wanted to be, but not really.
I just think that's much more fair than Feather Duster.
Yeah.
Generally speaking. You know? Like, I don't know. Ugh.
All right, let's get
Oh,
into
there's still
the.
evenly matched too. We don't need more back row stuff. There's still
Oh, no,
evenly
it's
matched.
fine.
You're fine.
Let's get into
You
the
don't need
limited cards
reboot.
before
You have Feather Duster, you have Lightning
Ryan.
Storm, you have evenly matched, you have Twin Twister. There's so much back row removal.
And anti-magic arrows. Yeah, okay, limited cards. Steam the Cloak and Erline we went over. I think those are whatever. Steam the Cloak might be cool in the Terrelament deck, right? Like, makes an Aqua token, haha. Cyberjaw?
really?
It does make an
token
Aqua
really
token,
awkward.
yes.
That's funny.
Yeah,
That's
Steam.
very funny. I hate it here.
Aqua, yeah, haha. Yeah, Cyberjaw. All right, what do we feel about Cyberjaw? I think that's kind of funny, and I think someone will
cares?
definitely try and make some kind of Cyberjaw Paul Cooper-esque FTK. I'm surprised he didn't post a status
There's
about
a
it.
rock. Maybe
Yeah.
you can search it with Gallant Granite, maybe, or is it a machine?
It is a rock, indeed. I remember that
Yeah.
because
Level-
they played Rock
Because used to be used
Bombardment.
that trap
Yes.
that sends it to
Yep.
the
Yeah.
graveyard.
Rock Bombardment. It sends it and burns for 500, and then they would shallow grave it back. Yep,
Oh.
terrible.
It might also be level 2, so maybe you can
It is
gigantic
level
spread
3,
it out.
so
It's
no.
level
No,
3, yeah.
you can Cherubini it then.
Ooh.
Fantastic.
All right, now we're cooking. All right, well, you'll see the Cyberjaw
Cherubini,
FTK.
Grave,
It'll pop up. Don't worry.
or something. Yeah, we'll be okay. We'll figure it out.
Dugaris, and then you set it and flip it or something. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
Substitute.
Prediction Princess. There's new Prediction Princesses coming out in Dark and Glass.
No, you're leaking my deck for 4 events. Substitute is probably just irrelevant, right? Same as Cyberjaw.
Without Toad.
Opens up funny decks.
Yeah, without Ronintoadin, yeah.
Well, I've seen people, it's like, should I get... that was a hot topic, right? When these sort of cards get unbanned, a lot of people get FOMO. And this is the one thing I'm always like, it's just like, you see the people who, like, stockpiled the ban cards, right? Yatagarasu comes back, people are selling secret rares for, like, infinite. And I had to say, no, this card will not be played in any deck. This card is not playable. If you think you need this card to play competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! And you love max rarity, you know, like, or even just in general, like, don't pay $30 for a common, you will never play this card. You will not put this card on a deck list or in your deck. Right? And that's the exact way I
agree.
feel about cards like Substitute and Cyberjaw. Unless you find some really niche combo deck, and you think, oh, like, I'm going to play this for one event, maybe it's justifiable that you should get, you know, like, those things. But, like, I feel like if you're making decks like that, you're probably going to have that card anyway, right? Like, you're one of
Lekunga.
those duelists that is like, I love frogs, substitute me, and then you come up with some Witch
Yeah.
Doctor of Sparta, Edison, FTK that has, like, 99% in advanced format or something, but who knows?
Yeah. Or you make a Lekunga deck that makes 19 Aqua tokens, or
Yes.
plant
Yo, I
tokens,
fucking
or whatever.
love Lukunga.
That card is
so
very
Lekunga is
fun.
nice. So, for those of you who don't know, Lekunga is just a random old like Invasion of Chaos rare. It's like a big tentacle monster, and its effect is you can banish 2 waters to make a token, and it's not once per turn. So Substitute could, in theory, cycle all your frogs out of your deck, and then if you can somehow get a Lekunga on the field, it can just make a bunch of tokens. And what does that do? Probably nothing, because your deck has to have 18 vanilla frogs in it. But, you know, maybe. Who knows? Maybe
Yeah,
you're
at this
just
point,
very
all
lucky.
the good Link monsters have been banned, right?
Yes,
Mhm.
so you can make Aromaseraphy Jasmine. Very
Yes.
good. Yeah. What's next? Spellbook
Alright.
of Judgment.
Spellbook of Judgment.
I
Ryan's been playing a lot of Master Duel with Spellbook of Judgment.
think this was dangerous, maybe, but at the same time, who cares? Like
Low-key, I think this is like another card where people are sort of like, again, okay, so on the note of like, oh, you don't have to go out and get all these like unbanned cards, you know, haha, like, I think this is a card that weirdly will like get reprinted in like the Maven set probably really quickly. Maybe it's already been decided.
I think they'll put Priestess
right?
and this card in the Maven
Hmm.
set, surely, right? Like
I also think this is probably the card that might have like a way, you know, to make it into the competitive format, like in some
I agree.
capacity.
This is the one. Like Substitute, no way. Cyberjar, no way. This is the one that you maybe play. Like this is the one that you might actually play.
Yeah, I definitely think this is like the card that's just like control enough without having to play too many. Like you can make like Crowley and like add it, right? Like you can just play like the very small packages, be like, haha, I'll summon random level 2, you know, or you just summon Jowgen. Like who gives a shit? Like you're just doing something ridiculous. Like this card probably didn't need to come back, but I don't think it's gonna hurt with it back. You know?
Also, I think like knowledge just a very good
Holy
buff
crap.
to this card.
Damn, Ryan, you just
What'd I do?
like
Did I
howled
just-
into the microphone. Oh,
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Can you hear me now?
I think
Are we
we've had enough Spellbook discussion at this point. Otherwise, we're
Are
gonna
we
drag
good?
out this ban list. We barely made it
My-
past the
I know.
limited list. A pointer of the Red
Is my-
Lotus
is-
to 1. I did not
Am I
expect
okay
this
now?
at all.
Oh no.
I didn't expect it
Can you-
either.
Ryan, you're fine. We can hear you anyway. Go on.
Good, thank you.
Yes. A pointer of the Red Lotus.
I was really concerned.
I think is like one of the weird cards that you see it. They obviously thought it was a lot more oppressive than it really is. Every time I get appointed, I'm really happy my opponent paid 2k. Unless my deck is one of those decks where it's like I get appointed and then I concede, in which case I probably shouldn't be playing that deck anyway. But yeah. I guess they were worried about Trap Trick, so they put it to 1, which is reasonable, but I don't know.
Well, if they were worried about Trap Trick, I would have liked to see Scythe banned.
Yeah, definitely.
haven't
right?
talked about.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
interesting that Appointer was the card they decided to get rid of instead of putting Sanctum
Yeah,
to
that
1,
is-
or even just banning Scythe in general. But yeah, you know, here we
Yeah.
are.
That's
All
a
right,
card
you wanna
that well, we're talking about Scythe. Where people like, there are a lot of people like when Scythe falls out of a format, people are like, "Oh, why are people still complaining about Scythe? It's not even doing well."
And then at
Okay,
the
well, I
beginning of the
guarantee
format-
you, it'll do well eventually again, and people
Yeah.
are going to be pissed again. It'll keep popping in and out of formats and making things really freaking awful. And it's just a card that, again, what do we say? It's used for evil and nothing
Yeah.
else.
Yes,
Pretty
only
much.
evil.
That
It's
card
only used
literally
for
has
evil.
0 application when the game is good or bad, right? Like when the game is just like generic, ignorant deck, like what happens? Oh, I have to go first and scythe my opponent. When the game is like not particularly fast and kind of back and forth, like what happens? Oh, I have to scythe my opponent, but then it'll take a little longer and like it's more grindy. I don't know. That like people are doing Scythe Sanctum when like Salamangreat was, you know, the perceived best deck, and it's like I don't think Salad had that much reach at the time. Like we didn't have access code. It was like update
Mine
trans
did.
code, right? You did, yes, but yours wasn't a Salad deck. Yours was a code
My
token
stupid
deck.
update jammer deck did.
Oh no, before Ryan has to talk about his update jammer deck that he almost topped the UDS with, let's look at the cards that went to 2, which is none, which is good. Step in the right direction.
Which is good, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And now let's look at the unlimited.
I'd like
We
to see
have-
Tanking Desires
Oh
get
yeah,
off the
for
2
sure. I think
eventually.
those cards at 2 is just redundant. Like there's just no point. They should
I'd like
just be at
Malicious to be alone again soon.
Mm.
But
3. We have to ban his.
let's just rapid fire the unlimiteds because I think we have like the same thing to say about most of them. I think Ben 10's the only one really worth like talking about, maybe.
I think the
but-
Deer Servant is like something you've already covered.
Yeah.
Wall of Revealing Light is very funny.
Yeah.
Shooting Rise
Ben 10
Dragon,
Knights,
yeah,
Ben
whatever.
10, Shooting Red Dragon, Fusion Destiny, Nadir Servant, Trickstar Light Stage, Wall of Revealing Light. Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Fusion
go
Destiny,
ahead and
maybe.
say-
Like you see a lot of people buying DPE. Like I've definitely sold through a lot in the last week.
Same.
I don't think it'll do anything.
Yeah.
I think you still need Predaplant to actually make that good.
I think your DPE is going to get banished by a Bestial card. And
Yeah,
you're gonna
like
scream.
literally they did it,
Yeah.
and now it's just like irrelevant, right? Like there's a whole archetype.
Yeah.
People are putting 4 cards in their deck in literally every deck in Japan to make your DPE the worst card. Like you literally have to play 6 bricks to get it banished by a free level 6 that floats into another level 6. Like who cares?
That flows into removal. Yes.
Yeah, literally,
it's
like,
just so painful.
I think
It literally
Ben 10 has
banishes-
the same problem, right? Like Ben 10 will have, who knows, maybe at Utrecht in the 3v3, you'll see Dryatron just like do well and then completely fall off after Darkwing Blast, right? Like as
I
expected.
didn't even
because
think about how terrible Drytron's going to be after
Oh, yeah.
the visuals come out. Oh my god.
Absolutely.
I didn't think about that at all.
Mm.
Wow, that deck sounds awful after Bestial.
well, even
Wow,
just like
that
into a
is- that is
Shizu, it
a
just seems
10.
so bad, man. Like,
Ben 10 can just go to 10. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I didn't think about that. Wow.
all right. Well,
Also, even like the like the Shizu cards, even
Mm.
if you mill all their stuff, whenever they activate any of them, you just shuffle them back and
Yeah,
put it
yeah.
back. So
mm. these
Yeah.
decks aren't, like they're getting the soft buff, but I think they're still just gonna be power crept out of the format as is tradition, which is what we saw in the
Yeah,
last year
for
anyway.
sure. I agree completely.
So
Yeah.
on the note of like the forbidden and limited list, right? Obviously we've seen more alternate formats pop up, right? We see a lot of old formats like Edison and Goat format, like we have the Time Wizard sort of stuff. Which I still think they're sort of figuring out the kinks of, because we did see a Nationals allow Exarion and all the purists are really upset, which I think is very funny. Oh no, they didn't allow Exarion, they allowed Cybernetic Revolution. Okay, that was equally as funny. But on that note, I feel like we've sort of neglected the Heart of the Underdog format, and that is something that you and Jeff have actively played. I think Ryan played what we can, look at as one of the bigger ones initially, and Jeff, you played one recently that was probably the biggest Heart of the Underdog format tournament that we know of.
We looked, and so Ryan's, I believe, was 65 people, right, Ryan?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then we had one a few months back that I did not participate in that was also around 65 people, and then we had one last week which was 45 people.
Okay.
So, just to kind of go over what the Heart of the Underdog is, I will read it to you from Konami's website. So this is an official format that Konami has allowed people to play with, and it says Heart of the Underdog is an alternative format for local tournaments that is offered by OTS stores that is designated to encourage duelists to flex their deck building skills in a fun and creative way. The format is primarily intended to be a fun and casual rather than being competitive, allowing duelists different ways to enjoy participating in the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG. Heart of the Underdog tournaments require all duelists to build a deck using a deck type that is not prominent in the current metagame. The final determination of whether a deck is allowed in the tournament is at the discretion of the OTS, so make sure to reach out to your OTS before you start building your Heart of the Underdog deck. As with all local tournaments, each OTS determines their tournament pricing and entry. The tournament can use either advanced or traditional forbidden lists, so make sure to check with your OTS on which forbidden list to prepare for.
Okay.
So basically, this just allows your store to make its own forbidden list to have a tournament with.
We saw that a lot, I think, during the very awkward part of the format, right? Like, when Adamancipator was really big, I do remember a lot of stores sort of just, like, having the house ban, right? Or you see Mystic Mayan having, like, a house ban, is what we called it here in Australia. It's like, we'll house ban these decks. Or they had, like, a Thursday night casual locals where it's like, someone made a custom ban list on a spreadsheet, and we'd all laugh and be like, haha, you can't get OTS packs, right? That was the whole thing. And now here we are, and it's supported, which is, I think, is a step in the right direction for sure.
And one of the things is when I posted about this, because I won mine recently, a lot of people just had no idea it was even a thing. I had people messaging me and commenting on Twitter, like, what is this? I don't understand. And other people were asking, oh, what's the forbidden list you use? Let's try to get my store to do it. And the thing about this is that you can kind of as long as you get your OTS and people to go along, you can kind of do whatever you want. And I don't really remember what Ryan's was. We had a giant list. Basically, you couldn't play any of the top decks right now. And on top of that, certain other cards, individual cards, were banned. So cards like all the Vanities monsters, all the barrier statues, any card that basically said that you can't special summon or activate an effect, something like that. So
cards that say you can't, I think, are probably like the least fun, right? That's like, in the eyes of like a casual player, it's like, if anything is stopping me from playing, what's the point? That's not Yu-Gi-Oh, right? I think it's like probably a big thing you'll see across a lot of these lists. So.
Yeah, mine was very similar. Mine had just a bunch of archetypes banned, and then it had its additional, like, there were cards that we wouldn't, or that we couldn't use. I think, like, the biggest one would be, like, some archetypes that were allowed, they would just get rid of, like, the, like, very oppressive card in that archetype in the context of this format. So, for example, the deck I ended up playing and winning mine with was Earth Machine, but Machina Citadel was banned. Because
mine
in
was
this
also
format,
had that banned.
Yeah, because like in the context of this format, like that card is very strong, obviously, but it's not, like unbeatable to like the top decks. When you remove the 20 best decks, that card becomes unbeatable. So you get rid of that card, and then the rest of the, like machine cards are pretty tame in the context. Like I think I played against Magistus in the finals of mine, and then my top four I played against like Plunder or something. Yeah, I don't know what you played against in your what decks did you play against? This is also mine was 6 months ago, so more decks have come out and probably been banned. But
Yeah, so in during mine, I played against round one. I played against DDD, which seemed very strong and didn't have any cards touched on it.
That seems like a big oversight.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
initial
I
thoughts, but
know in the previous one they had Kepler banned, and in this sense, no one played it. They unbanned it for this one. There's only I think one person playing it, but I ended up being his only loss. I played Crystal Beast, by the way. I won my 45-person 6-round $1,000 tournament with Crystal Beast. So that's pretty cool with the help of Ryan Levine and Jesse Cotton. So yeah, I played against DD and was able to win there somehow because some of the new Crystal Beast cards are crazy, and when you draw them, you win. And
yes.
then I played against, and then I played against True Draco, and then I played against Lunalight, and I played against two of the new Labyrinth deck, which seemed very strong in that format. And then in the last round, I played against a Crusadia Kaiju deck. And he actually gave me one of my losses because I opened up
a lot of
double
these
Rainbow
decks that
Dragon.
you're mentioning seem really, really good in a watered down format.
Yeah.
Like I
Another
think
popular deck that in there was Cosmo. A lot of people liked Cosmo with trap cards. I'm trying to think of what else other people liked. Yeah, there's a whole lot of everything. There's actually quite a lot of the Labyrinth deck. I think there's at least 5 people playing that because it's like more modern, right? And in a format like that, traps are probably pretty good. And so there's a lot of Ice Dragons prisons running around and stuff like that. Oddly enough, something funny is that I have never opened up Call by the Grave so much in a tournament and have it be the worst card in my deck. Because on that format, just no one played hand traps. For our tournament, Ash Blossom and Nibiru were both forbidden, and so no one just played any of the other hand traps. I ended up playing like Imperm, Veiler, and DD Crow, but I never really activated any of those cards outside of like Imperm or whatever, and I never got hand trapped outside of Imperm either. So my DD or my Call by the Grave never really did anything.
it's funny that you mentioned that they banned Ash when I think Ash in most iterations is probably like the fairest hand trap, right? Like I don't think it's suppressive whatsoever. Whereas like Nibiru is obviously like not really fun to like a casual player. I think it's like another sort of like
Right.
hidden trick, right? Like if you're making the format as like fun as possible, you shouldn't be putting up like 50 negates, hopefully not putting up 50 negates. So like a card like Nibiru is obviously like stifling a deck like the Crystal Beast deck or something that's just making like haha funny board, Like I guess one
Yeah,
of these
like
will
my
pop.
Crystal Beast
Yeah.
deck summons 10,000 times, but ends on very little. And
Yeah. But like Ash being hit is so weird to me. I don't know. It feels
Yeah,
kind of
well,
odd.
okay,
I
I
think it's
think
because a lot of like the more fair decks could just get their turns ended by a well-timed Ash
by literally
Blossom. And I
one.
think that,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think that's the reason why.
I think that's a deck building issue in like a slower sort of format, right? Or like a format that you're like kind of trying to make slow enough. But again, I think this sort of lays into what I was trying to what I was going to bring up. Sorry, is for stuff like this, right? I think a format like this is good for the fact that like you can do it, it can exist. But I do think you see a lot of like division between local players for formats like this, right? Where it's like people don't agree on hits and choices. Basically, just like the actual ban list. Do you think people would benefit from maybe a group of, let's say, Duelist Academy makes a Heart of the Underdog format list that gets updated weekly, or not weekly, but like, like maybe month to month or something based on releases, maybe like some in-house testing and stuff like that. Do you think there would be a benefit to having even just like pockets of the community, right? Like that could be cool. You have like a DA one, and then maybe you have like a luxury gaming Heart of the Underdog list. Maybe you have one from Europe, one from from South America, Central America, stuff like that. Like that could be very, very interesting, where they use that as a marker, as a guide, and then maybe if they've neglected like one deck that just is just miles above every other deck, you have that as sort of like your, oh, here it is. Obviously, it takes some of the fun out. However, I do think the card pool of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is very vast, and without rotation, you're able to use every card. And there are going to be cards you have like, very big oversights of, like, just hearing what you're saying, like the decks that you've asked, in my head, I don't think I would, allow some of these decks to even be playable. Like, I think they would actually just be like way, way better than anything else, especially like DDD, and they haven't hit anything. It's like, I think you would hit the DDD link in a heartbeat. You know what I mean? Like, so that could be something we could look at if people are interested. I don't necessarily know where we're posting this right now, but yeah, we'll see. Like, if you guys are interested in like maybe Jeff and Ryan, and we have some input from someone like Jesse, myself, and just everyone else in the crew, could just have like a spreadsheet of like, hey, like, these cards are hit. These are like the silliest cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! Go for your life. Here's Heart of the Underdog.
I think that would be a really good idea, especially because, again, after my post on Twitter, I saw a lot of interest from PMs and stuff like that, where people were interested, but they never heard of it, or they don't think that they could get something like this done in their area. Not every area is blessed with people who have a great amount of knowledge, and that would make it very hard to get a Heart of the Underdog tournament going, but not only going, but also successful, because a successful tournament is obviously going to be dependent on what your Heart of the Underdog list is. So in Magic and Pokemon, they have had formats made by players that have turned very successful.
So has Yu-Gi-Oh! Don't forget.
What was that?
So has Yu-Gi-Oh!
Made by players?
ARG format. Oh no. New
Yu-Gi-Oh! We actually won back-to-back ARG. You won the first one, and then I won the second one.
Oh, did
Something like that. Yeah.
Oh, with the side frame?
Like that. Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, back to this. I think that if people were interested in this, I would love to be able to make a Heart of the Underdog list that the majority of people could take to their locals and say, hey, can we play this? And because, again, like I said, not everyone is fortunate to have a huge local scene with great players or very knowledgeable people. And I think this is a great way to get your, not only, I mean, would not be considered a casual player. I don't think Ryan would be either, but we both played in these tournaments, and I think we both had a lot of fun. So not only can this get your casual player base to come out and play Yu-Gi-Oh! If they don't really like how competitive is anymore, but even the competitive players can have fun with cards they used to play or cards they would never play at all. So I think all of us would love to be able to put this out there for people and try and promote it.
Do you think that there is a world where maybe Heart of the Underdog, in like its current form, right? I think you do have a lot of issues when it comes to some of these like niche decks still having a weird price point. Obviously, it's not as big of a problem now, but I feel like there's obscure archetypes that just have like gate kept like cards, like maybe okay. To put it in perspective, a lot of people enter. Sorry, go on. You go first.
I was gonna say, you bring up a good point. I get what you're getting at. Is that for these alternative formats, do people want to spend money to play these formats? Basically,
because some people only have like one deck. Like, are you going to have a fun deck now because Heart of the Underdog is supported? But then you also have to look at like, do I have a fun deck that is financially feasible for me to justify owning, right? And will it get hit in my my local's perceived Heart of the Underdog format? And that's where I think there can be kind of issues, and that's why you see attendance not be as big as it should be. compared to maybe something like Pokemon or Magic where you can have a custom format and it's really just like, you know, the deck building process isn't as strenuous. You know, a lot of it is just being filled up with like lands and then some like generics, and then you have your archetype stuff, right? Whereas like Yu-Gi-Oh is like, oh, we're gonna have this format, and it's like, what should we be hitting? And then half of the deck is just like gone, and now you have to actually just fill it up with like all engine, all this, all that, and maybe like you'll have some generics that end up getting hit anyway because those generic cards just end up being the best cards of the format anyway, right? So you have to basically just like have a whole second format that can, you know, be at your local's whim. It gets kind of weird. It gets a little bit dicey. I think that does come down to like who is running your event, right? Like if you have someone who is literally just like putting the hammer down every single time, like, oh, we had a Heart of the Underdog format, and after Jeff Jones posted about it, all these kids, you know, were metagaming, and the top 8 was just 8 of the same deck. Like, there's no fun in that. It's like, no, there is fun in that. It's like 8 of the same deck that you wouldn't see before, and like 8 people came up with that. Like, that's cool. You know, that's my bad. You had an oversight, but now you're gonna hit it. You know, like, oh, I got my one event mileage out of it. And that's where it becomes kind of an issue, right? I think you need to have some like rules in place to sort of mitigate that. Maybe you have like, oh, okay, if this deck wins Heart of the Underdog events, like say you hold it at like a local level, maybe after it wins like 4 events or 3 events, like Flesh and Blood, they have Living Legend status, right? Where if a hero does well in like their premiere events, if it does well over multiple events in a season or like a pocket of like a format, they end up banning it, and that's how they determine their forbidden and limited list, as well as like, you know, other things. But I think taking that concept for maybe something like Heart of the Underdog, where you just have like a living legend sort of thing with, you know, the weird archetypal decks that might be too oppressive, that, you know, you didn't really get to figure out because, you know, who's playing a made up format of Heart of the Underdog to see like, oh, Labyrinth versus this deck, like maybe someone is, and I, you know, I appreciate you, you're a good person, but yeah, like,
it's really funny. For mine, I actually one of the people at my locals, who I think is like one of the more competent people, instead of playing the locals the day before the big Heart of the Underdog tournament, we just sat in the corner and tested our Heart of the Underdog decks, and then we played in the finals.
I mean, it's like that, dude. Like,
yeah.
Yeah, and I think something that, I mean, going back to the whole like price point to play in something like this, I had multiple people who in my friend group and acquaintances that I have say play decks and do very well with them, and they just when I asked, well, why'd you play that, and they just said, oh, it's just what I had, and I didn't want to buy other cards. And so, like, one of my friends who got top 8 played Beat Troopers. And I was like, oh, why did you decide that? He's like, oh, it's what I had, and I like them, and I didn't want to buy any new cards to play in this. And a lot of people were like that. So someone played, like, Dragoonity. I like pure Dragoonity. And so there wasn't any, like, crazy, like, Dragon Link stuff you could do, but you could play, like, cool Dragoonity cards. And he's like, I just like the Dragoonity cards, and I had them, so I played them. And I think you'll get a lot of people like that who are like, oh, I just have these cards and I like them and I play them. And some people might go and spend, you know, like $20 or $30 to add new cards to their deck or whatever. But I think overall, the decks that you can play, while there are obviously some outliers, aren't going to be overly expensive if you want to invest money into them to play a tournament. It also depends, like it's like the kind of like risk versus reward. Do you want to spend money to play in this tournament? It depends how it's supported. Like my local tournament, it was $1,000 worth of stuff given away. So a lot of people showed up, and the same time before they give away game systems. And with Ryan got a case of some set. I don't know what you got. What did you get, Ryan?
Battles of Chaos.
Yeah, so he got Battles of
Battle of
Chaos, a
Chaos.
case of Battle of Chaos. So you have to be able to also, if you want to run this tournament, probably get your store to support it and give away some good prizes too. I think that is also what will drive people. Not only do you have fun playing a new deck or a deck you wouldn't normally play, but also winning good prizes on top of that is also a good way to bring people out.
But I do think that the biggest thing will end up just being like, maybe there needs to be some, again, like this is all irrelevant because it's not coming from Konami directly, right? But if maybe like a group of players, again, doesn't have to be us, can be other people, you just come up with a rule set to limit, like, oh, well, here's Heart of the Underdog format, and you don't want people having the same feeling of like Advanced Constructed, where they buy a deck, the deck is now hit by the ban list, right? Like that's like the crippling feeling for a lot of these like players, and I see it at locals a lot. Again, just buy a deck gets hit. Okay, they've never experienced this before, and it can happen with Heart of the Underdog. Having it happen in 2 formats is like really defeating. And at that point, I just look at it and think, why would anyone play Heart of the Underdog when they could play an old format like Edison or like Goat or something with a Time Wizard OP initiative, right? Like that's just like, my deck is going to last the entire time. The list is static, it's not changing. And if, I get more comfortable with that format or it's supported locally, maybe I can look at like, another deck and it's all like relatively inexpensive. So that's why it's like, if you just have someone who's not like super tyrannical involved at your local store, who's willing to, be really understanding, and it isn't, just looking to like, oh, I'm going to hit every deck, and, they have some, thought process behind it, I think that's where you see Heart of the Underdog thrive. When you see people just making a list that deviates from advanced format and they just hit everything, and if more stuff is, identifies as good, and they're like, oh, I don't like this deck, I think it's too good in my Heart of the Underdog format, and they hit that, but then, now 4 people can't play. You know what I mean? Like, that's when you have some issues. So I think you do need to sort of just, like, look at it under a microscope, throw some other rules to it, give some security to your player base, and then I think you see Heart of the Underdog thrive, just alongside, formats like the Time Wizard, Edison, and Goat format.
Yeah, and I think between all of us, I think we would be able to have the foresight and the future sight to look at a list and make the correct changes depending on what players do. So let's say we do go ahead with this and we put out our own JRB
DA
list.
luxury
JRB list,
list. Yes, whatever it is.
And if stores want to go ahead with that, they can go ahead and give us our results, and we can take the results of tournaments over 3 months and make corrections to it, and make corrections to it also as new sets come out as well. Like, I know that I'm pretty sure that after this next set comes out, Black Wings is probably going to be one of the hit archetypes, because that would probably be way too good in a very dumbed down version of Yu-Gi-Oh,
Yeah, bare bones, just summon big dudes. Black Wings summons a big dude that is unaffected, and here we are. Oh well.
Yeah, there was a lot of summon big guys, even like in a format where, like we said, people could still play DDD. A lot of decks just couldn't deal with big guy tack whatever, which is why I think the Labyrinth deck did well, because it got to use good trap cards. And then Regeki was also very prominent in people's side decks and stuff, because it could deal with big monsters that you normally
not throwing up a bunch of negates and stuff like that. Those sort of cards are really good to simplify. But then the funny part about that is, if you're looking at tournament results, you're looking at some deck lists, when are you hitting Regeki? When is Regeki sort of just a weird one, right?
Exactly. Yeah. You never know.
Yeah.
So, all right. Any closing thoughts here, guys?
Not on Heart of the Underdog. I think we covered it more than I thought. We covered a lot about that.
Yeah, no, I think it could be a big thing. I think, like, if someone is willing to like dedicate some time, maybe there's like there could be like a Heart of the Underdog Discord server, you know what I mean, where it's like people post their, like, they discuss the ban list, right? This is like something that you might see on like Reddit or something like that, like a subreddit for Heart of the Underdog, like they have their Facebook groups and all of that stuff. And I think that's really good for like communication, right? Because again, we're only human. I don't think we're going to see every little thing. And that same thing happens with Konami, right? Like when Konami makes the Forbidden and Limited list, they're not seeing everything. More games are played after the list is put out. More games are played literally like the hour after a ban list is legal on Dueling Book than I think Jerome and Billy and whoever else is in R&D now would have played with that list leading up to it being legal, right? The player base decides that stuff.
Involved.
Exactly,
like,
right? So like, it's just fixing itself as it goes, but I think it's less restrictive when you don't have the whole approval process and stuff like that. So you do have this opportunity to have a nice format by the community that gets fixed time after time. And if you identify a problem, it can be hit quicker without, any red tape behind it. You just get rid of it as you go. And I think that could be a really cool thing for the game, like as a whole, and like for, just communities that are willing to, put Heart of the Underdog in their organized play schedule. I think it'll be a really big thing. But we need, again, we can make the ban list, but we're only, a couple people, and that's a lot of effort. You need like a dedicated group, I think. So it could be a potential thing. But that's what we said about DA, and, we have all these guys, helping us with the Discord bots and all of that stuff. So who knows, man?
All right, so I think that about wraps it up for our first episode. Thank you all for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.